Hello, and welcome back to the demo portion, if you will, of Chapter 8. And Chapter 8 is all about the master budget. So, we already did kind of a overview, a quick overview, really, of all the budgets that go into making the master budget. So, what we're going to do is go through our study guide, and we're going to go over all the exercises that we have to do. There's I think like 6 or 7 of those. But I really want you to see the mechanics of what we talked about, right? So exercise 8-1 is on page 362. And what we have to do is, or what the problem asks for, is for us to prepare a schedule of expected cash collections from sales. Now, if you remember from the lecture video, we said that, hey, before we do anything, sales budget's key. That drives this entire process, okay? Now, the problem already gave us the sales budget. If you notice, they always say budgeted sales, 300,000 for April, May 500,000, June 200,000, and then the total was 1,000. And they also give us more information. They talk about the collections, right, based on past experiences. Says that the company learns that 20% of the month's sales are collected in that month of the sale. 70% are collected in the month following the sale, and the remaining 10% of cash that we need to collect from the sale is actually collected in the second month following the sale. They also give us February and March sales, okay? So we have to do this for the second quarter, April, May, and June. So what we need to do is start in April, and we need to think, and we need to look back and say, okay, are there any sales that were made in the first quarter that we still need to collect cash for? So we know that it's basically we collect for a sale 2 months after that sale occurred. So we're in April, we need to look backwards and say, okay, February, that was 2 months ago. I made sales of 230,000. Am I going to collect any of that cash in the month of April? Well, I sure am. I'm going to collect 10% of that. So in April, I'm going to collect 10% of February sales. 10% times 230,000 is $23,000. So that means in total, I've collected 23,000 in the second quarter from first quarter sales. Okay, let's go back a month, March. Well, the adage says in the month of the sale, I collect 20%, month after 70%, 2 months after 10%. Okay, we're in April. Because of that 20-70-10 rule, for lack of a better term, right? I know that in April I'm going to collect 10%, or I'm sorry, in April I'm going to collect 70% of March's sales. March's sales were 260,000. So 260,000 times 70% is $182,000. Now let's keep going with March's sales. So in March, I collected 20% of 260,000. In the month of April, I collected 70% of March's sales. Guess what? In May, I'm going to collect 10% of March's sales. So 10% of 260,000 is $26,000. And that means in the month, or from March's sales, I've collected $208,000 in the second quarter. Okay, let's look at April. In April, we sold $300,000 worth of merchandise. I know in the month of April, I'm going to collect 20% of that month's sales. 20% times 300,000 should give me $60,000. In May, I'm going to collect 70% of April's sales. 70% times 300,000 is 210,000. June. The month of June is 2 months after April. Well, I know 2 months after the sale, I collect 10%. So in June, I'm going to collect 10% of April sales, which is 10%. That ends up being $30,000. So if you notice, in April, I collect all the cash from my April sales. 60,000, 210,000, 30,000. I collect all $300,000 of cash sales. In May, I know in the month of May, I sell $500,000 worth of merchandise. Based on past experiences, I know that I collect 20% of that month's sales. So 20% times 500,000 is $100,000. In June, the month following the sale, I know I collect 70% of my May sales. So 70% times 500,000 gives me $350,000. So in the second quarter, I collect $450,000 of my May sales. Okay? Do the same thing for June. In June, I sell $200,000 worth of merchandise. I know in the month of the sale, I collect 20% of that. That's $40,000. Well, what about July and August? Well, guess what? That's the third quarter. Not worried about the third quarter. I'm only worried about the cash we collect in the second quarter. So if we look at June, I only collect $40,000 in the second quarter of the $200,000 that I sell. So we now can calculate all the cash that we collect in April, all the cash we collect in May, all the cash we collect in June. All we got to do is just add up the totals, right? April, 23,000. From February, March, 182,000. From April, 20%, which ends up being 60,000. That means in the month of April, I collect $265,000. Do the same thing for May. In May, I collect $336,000. In June, I collect $420,000. So in total, I collect $1,021,000. Now, part 2 asks for our accounts receivable. How much did we not collect in the second quarter, and how much do we need to collect in that third quarter? Well, that's easy. I know in July, I'm going to collect 10% of May sales. So 500,000 times 10%, which will be collected in July, is going to be $50,000. In June, I sold $200,000. I only collected 20% of that, right? But I know that I still need to collect 80%. I'm not going to collect it in June because June's over and done with. I need to report how much money do I still have, or how much cash do I still have coming to me. Well, 80% times the 200,000 ends up being 160. So that means my total receivables for June 30th is $210,000. That's just the amount of cash that I have not collected yet from the various month sales. Okay. Now, if we look at exercise 8-2, that's also on page 392. what we need to do here is we need to prepare the production budget by month in total for the second quarter as well. Okay, great. I can do this. Normally, we would have to do the budgeted sales in units first. They gave that to us. April's 50,000, May's 75,000, June is 90,000, and then we have July. Okay? You might be thinking, well, wait a minute, why do I need July? Because we need July because the company says, hey, you know what? Even though we're producing units, we want to take into account what we're going to sell in the following months. And we want to make sure that we pad our inventory, meaning in April, we produce a little more. So when we start May, we already have some finished goods already to go. The problem tells us that, hey, the month end inventory levels have to equal 10% of the following month's unit sales. Okay. And they tell us that the inventory at the end of March is 5,000 units. Now, before we go any further, I remember in the lecture video, at least I hope I said this, we have to understand that formula. We got to know that formula, right? So we're doing the we're doing the production budget. So we need to take our budgeted sales in units plus desired ending inventory, which is 10% of the following month. That equals our total needs. We subtract out our beginning inventory, what we started with. That tells us how much we need to produce in units. Okay? So we're going to start with April. We already know our beginning balance, or our beginning finished goods balance in April, is $5,000. Okay? We know that in April we have to produce 50,000 because that's what we're going to sell. We have to produce at least 50,000. But we also need to include that desired ending inventory of 10% of the following month. So what is our desired ending inventory? To figure that out, we need to look at budgeted sales in May, which is 75,000. We multiply that by 10%, we get 7,500 units. That means at the end of the month, we want to have 7,500 units left over so we could start May. I take my budgeted sales and add my desired ending inventory to get my total needs. That is 57,500. I then subtract my beginning inventory, which is 5,000. I put that in the wrong spot. Sorry about that. Okay. So now I have my total needs. I need to get rid of the beginning inventory because I already have those finished goods. I don't need to produce them. They were already produced in March. The required production for this month is 52,500. Okay. Now let's move to May. And before we start calculating everything, I just want to show you something. Notice May, we ended with 7,500 units. The end of our April, we ended the month with 7,500 units. Guess what? We're going to start May with 7,500 units. Notice I color coded these because desired ending inventory and beginning inventory actually carry over from one month to the next. Remember, one month's ending balance is the following month's beginning balance. So now I can go ahead and work through the numbers, right? I know I'm budgeted to sell 75,000 units, so I got to produce close to that, right? At least that, right? But then we want to factor in that we want a desired ending inventory of $9,000. That's 10% of June's production or June's budgeted sales. That means my total needs for the month of May are 84,000 units. But how much am I required to produce? Well, I already started the month with 7,500 units. I need 84,000, right? So I'm going to subtract those two and I end up with 76.5. That's my required production in units. Okay, let's go to June. In June, right off the bat, what's my beginning inventory? Well, it was in May, I ended the month with 9,000. That must mean that I start June with 9,000 units. And again, I'm just color coding these to show how they carry over. So we're at June. What's my desired ending inventory? Well, it's 10% of the following month. That's why they gave us July. That's 8,000 units, right? 10% times 80,000. That means that my total needs for the month of June is 98,000 units. I began the month with 9,000. I need 98,000. So if I subtract the two, I get 89,000 units. Okay? Now, I got to add up all my totals. Budgeted sales in units, I'm going to add up this row and I get 215,000. Desired ending inventory, okay? We do not add up these rows because we know what the desired ending inventory is. It's not a culmination of 7,500, 9,000, and 8,000. It's 8,000 units. That's my desired ending inventory. Crap. That's my desired ending inventory. Okay? So these actually get carried over. Okay? Trying to figure out what my total needs are. Well, I could take 215,000 plus 8,000, or I can add up the total needs from April, May, and June. Either way I do it, I get 223,000 units. Now, less beginning inventory, right? I started the quarter with 5,000. I'm going to end the quarter with 5,000. Okay? And required units, I can just add these up. 52.5, 76.5, and 89,000 should give me 218,000 units that I need. Okay, that is how you do the production budget. Keep in mind that desired ending inventory and less beginning inventory carry over from one month to the next, meaning one month's ending is the next month's beginning. When I get to the end, okay, I can add up all my rows with the exception of the desired ending inventory and the beginning inventory. The beginning inventory or less beginning inventory, that has to be the same in the total column, has to be the same number I started with. Okay. Desired ending inventory, it has to be in the total column, has to be the final month's desired ending inventory. Okay. Now, 8.3 deals with direct materials budget. Okay. So what we have here is mink caress. I guess they make mink oil, or they make some kind of perfume that requires mink oil. I have no idea what mink oil is. Anyways, they give us some information. They say 3 grams of musk oil is required to make each bottle of Mink Caress. It's a popular perfume made in Western Siberia. Okay, the cost of mink oil is $1.50 per gram. Okay, budgeted production of Mink Caress is given below by quarters for year 2 and the first quarter of year 3. Okay, so I already plugged that in. I think I plugged that in for you guys. I can't remember if I did that or not. Those are the production in bottles, right? Required production in units that we want for finished goods, right? We're producing finished goods here basically, all right? So they tell us that musk oil has become so popular as a perfume ingredient that it has become necessary to carry large inventories as a precaution against any stockouts, right? For this reason, the inventory of musk oil at the end of a quarter must be equal to 20% of the following quarter's production needs, okay? 36,000 grams of musk oil will be on hand at the start of the first quarter of year 2. So we can use schedule 3 in our book. No need to do that because I made the template for us, and we're going to go through the formula first. And we're going to prepare a direct materials budget for musk oil by quarter and in total for year 2. Okay? So, first things first. Let's figure out this formula, right? We need to figure out how much raw material we need to buy. Well, that's easy. Okay? We already have the required production units, right? We got this from our sales budget. We're going to sell 60,000 first quarter, 90,000 in the second quarter. Third quarter, we're going to sell 150,000, and the fourth quarter, we're going to sell 100,000. That's incorrect. 100,000. Sorry. Okay. Now, the first thing I need to do is figure out how much raw materials do I need per unit. So I'm going to say RM per unit. Well, the problem told me I need 3. I need 3 grams of this musk oil. Okay, so I'm just going to plug that in. I multiply those two, and this, once I multiply those two, those give me the units needed to meet production. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and calculate that out, right? 60,000 times 3, I need 180,000 grams of musk oil for first quarter. Second quarter, 3,000 times, or I'm sorry, 90,000 times 3, 270,000. Third quarter, 150,000 times 3, that's 450,000 grams of musk oil. Fourth quarter, I need 3 grams, and I'm going to make 100 bottles. That's 3,000, or 300,000, excuse me. Okay, so I got my total production needs. To that, I need to add the desired ending inventory. I know from the problem that that's 20% of the following month's needs, right? So I'm going to say 20%. 20% follow, meaning following months. Okay. From there, that gives me the total needs, right? Or the total RM needed. From that total needed, remember, if I have a desired ending inventory, I must have a beginning inventory. So I'm going to subtract out my beginning RM, or raw materials inventory. Okay? To that, I'm going to ask, what is my cost, or the unit cost of RM? And that's going to give me the total cost of raw material to be purchased. Okay? So this is identical to what we did in the production budget, right? Pretty much. The only added step was we had to recognize that, you know what, it's not a one-for-one trade-off, meaning one unit of raw material does not make one finished good. It's a 3-for-1 trade-off, right? I need 3 raw materials to make 1 unit. So that's how we end up with the units needed to meet production. Now we can figure out, okay, how much am I going to need? How much am I going to need to make to get my desired ending inventory? So I know that my desired ending inventory is 20% of the following months units needed to meet production. Well, in the following month, I need 270,000 units of musk oil times 0.2, or 20%. That gives me 54,000 units. Okay? So my total needs then are my 180,000 times my 54,000. I need a total of 234,000 units. The problem tells us, hey, you started beginning raw materials inventory with 36,000 grams of raw material of musk oil. Okay, so I'm going to subtract that. I made a mistake here, bear with me. Yep, units of raw material needed. So I'm going to say 234 minus 36,000 gives me 198,000 units. Okay. Where it says unit cost, let's delete unit cost. And we're gonna delete the whole thing. This is the units needed to be purchased. Okay. And then where it says cost of raw materials to be purchased, let's get rid of that. And this is actually the unit cost. We know the unit cost is $1.50 per unit, and we can plug that in for the entire year. Okay, tab down so we get another row. Now we have the cost of raw material to be purchased. Okay, and to figure that out, we take the 198,000 times $1.50. That gives us $297,000. Okay, so let's look at the second quarter. Right off the bat, I know from the second quarter I'm starting with beginning inventory of 54,000 units, right? I just carried it over. Okay, now let's figure out what is the desired ending inventory. Well, it has to be 20% of $450,000 or 450,000 grams. 20% of that is 90,000. I can add the units needed to meet production plus the desired ending inventory of 90,000 gives me 360,000 units needed. Okay, however, I'm starting the month with 54,000 units. So if I take the total raw materials needed of 360,000 minus the beginning raw materials of 54,000, I end up with 306,000 units. I'm going to multiply that by my unit cost of $1.50 per unit, and I end up with $459,000. I did the same exact thing I did for the third quarter. Okay, what's my beginning raw materials inventory for the third quarter? Well, what's the desired ending inventory of the second quarter, which is 90,000 units or 90,000 grams of musk oil. I need to figure out for the third quarter, what is my desired ending inventory, meaning how much do I want to end the third quarter with? How many units? Well, 20% times the 300,000 units that I need for the fourth quarter ends up being 60,000. I now know what my total raw materials needed are. It's 510,000. I got that by adding the units needed to meet production for the third quarter for 450,000 plus the desired ending inventory, which again is 20% of the fourth quarter's units needed to meet production of 300,000. That's how I get that's how I got the 60,000. I add those. I need to subtract out my beginning raw materials. That's the $90,000 that I started or 90,000 units that I started the month with. 510 minus 900,000 gives me 420,000 grams of musk oil. I multiply that by $1.50 because that's how much it costs me. That's $630,000. And again, this one's dollars. Okay, the fourth quarter. Let's plug in what we already know. Units are beginning raw materials inventory. Well, if I ended the third quarter with 60,000 units of musk oil, guess what? I'm going to start the fourth quarter with 60,000 units. Oh, sorry. I need to figure out what my desired ending inventory is. Well, guess what? It needs to be 20% of the first quarter of year 3. If you look at the book, it says the first quarter of year 3 you start off with 70 or the budgeted production in bottles is 70,000 bottles. Okay, it's not 20% of 70,000 because that's the number of bottles that I'm going to make. I need 3 grams of this musk oil to make one bottle, so I'm going to take 70,000 times 3. That's the total units of raw material or units of raw material needed to meet production, right? Then I'm going to multiply that by 20%. So I'm taking 70,000 units times 3 grams per unit times 20% gives me 42 grams or 42,000 grams. Okay? So I now know that in the fourth quarter my total raw materials needed are 342,000 grams of this musk oil. Since I started the period, or the quarter rather, with 60,000, I need 342,000. The difference between those two should be 282 or 282,000 units. What's the cost of that? Well, I multiply that 282,000 times $1.50. I end up with $423,000 worth of raw materials cost to be purchased in the fourth quarter. Okay, so not too bad there. I'm going to break this up, just make it a little easier on you guys. So when we come back in our next video, we're going to look at exercise 8-4, which deals with direct labor budget. Okay, so tune in for that one.